Hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way Yorkville. Happy Monday. Welcome to tonight's live broadcast. Today, we're going to talk about stress. All right. Uh-oh. And the question is got stress? Here's how it can kill you. Here's how stress can kill you. So if you have stress in your life right now, make sure that you are honest with yourself and understand that there is a long-term stress will absolutely destroy. I'll start how it destroys hormones, how it destroys the immune system long term. And if you are watching tonight, if you're watching from the wonderful platforms of Facebook, from YouTube and Rumble, let me know, say hello, and also let me know where you're watching from. I know right now we are streaming live to our Instagram page too using our phone. And so we have a bunch of wonderful people who are watching us right now. If you're watching on Instagram, again, please make sure that you say hello. Give me a wave. Let me also know where you're watching from. I would appreciate it greatly. Thank you guys so much for watching. Got stress? Here is how it absolutely can kill you. So don't forget, guys, please make sure that you watch it. If you can, please make sure you follow us on our YouTube page at Dr. Nathan Thompson and also on Rumble. I know that we're simultaneously streaming to those platforms right now. So if you head on over to YouTube, you head on over to Rumble, you'll be able to see the live broadcast at the time. And if you actually want to see the slides, you want to watch it live with the slides, it'll probably be a better viewing experience for you if you are watching on Instagram. Okay. Now, if you're watching on Facebook, you're watching on that, then you'll be able to see all the slides just like you can see what's up right now. But if you don't already, I would sincerely appreciate it if you gave us a subscribe to YouTube, also on Rumble as well. We try to put out 1 to 2 videos every single month or every single week on there of tremendous benefit. And so if you find what I'm going over tonight of tremendous benefit, just make sure that you like our page, make sure that you follow us to stay up to date on a lot of the things. A lot of times I'll ask a patient, I'm like, when they ask me a question, I'm like, I just went over that. Did you watch it? And they're like, no. I'm like, go back and watch that. And that'll help you make a lot more sense as well. Now, coming up, guys, if you are from the Chicagoland area, please pay attention to this. If you are from the Chicagoland area, coming up on Tuesday, January 30th at 6 o'clock p.m., this is an in-person event, is please make sure to come to our inflammation talk. Okay, this is our approach to inflammation. And the reason why is that if anything involves the immune system, which will stimulate an inflammatory response, this is why it can cause some issues with weight loss resistance, cancer, infertility, issues with the thyroid, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, and yes, even your hormones as well. Hormones don't make you sick, but they'll make you feel sick. That's one of the biggest things that I can tell you. So if you are from the Chicagoland area, make sure if you're watching on Instagram, go ahead and go to the top of the page. If you are watching on any of those other platforms, if you go to our link tree, or you'll also see a link to register for the inflammation event. This is an in-person event. So if you are from a different country, please don't register for it unless you plan on driving here and staying here for the next at least couple of weeks. All right. And it seems like at every inflammation event that we have people who register from Thailand, or if they're registering from England or something. This is an in-person event. And if you happen to not be able to make it to the in-person event and you're from outside the Chicagoland area, just remember this, is our availability to do remote consults is extremely, extremely limited. However, you can go and register. If you follow the links on this page that you're on, you can watch the inflammation webinar remotely. This is a webinar. And if you follow it all the way to the end, you'll see a link to be able to schedule a one-on-one call with me called a discovery call. Yes, there's a charge that's involved with it. And that link, you will not see it until you get towards the end of the inflammation webinar. The reason why is because I really want you to watch the inflammation webinar, not for my sake, but for your sake, because it'll make everything makes so much more sense when I say, here's where I want you to start. So if you are within the contiguous 48 states, which means here in the United States doesn't include Alaska or Hawaii. It's just too hard to get things, in there because of it's just way, way harder. Or if you're from a different country, and this also includes Canada as well. But if you live within the contiguous 48 states, then this is just for you. So make sure that you watch the inflammation webinar. Please make sure that you go and register for it because there's the option to watch it right now Make sure that you have enough, at least an hour of your time to be able to watch it. Or you can schedule it for Tuesday or Saturday at about, I think, 9 o'clock your time. And that way you can watch it at that time. So this is for people who are not in the Chicagoland area, but are within the contiguous 48 states. If that's you, please watch that inflammation webinar as well. Now, coming up in January, we kicked off our meats and veggies only challenge January 1st. I've done a lot of live videos in regards to that. And we're about 3 weeks into it. We got about a week and a half left. Okay, we're coming down the stretch, guys. You can do this. I know that you can do this. What is the meat and veggie only challenge? Well, I want you to think of it. Meats and veggies. Okay. Is it a meat? Yes. Is it a veggie? Yes. Okay. And go ahead and eat it. All right. Um, so we're coming towards the end of that. And if you haven't started, you can always start it. You don't have to start with me. You can start it at any time, but the resources are going to be at the top of, especially my Instagram page. You'll see a post there that's got kind of a little bit more detail as far as some of the guidelines in regards to that as well. Guys, another cool thing is you can go onto Facebook, and you can even go on to, if you type in the Wellness Way No Sugar Challenge, that is nearly identical to what we're trying to do too. And there's a huge support group with about 30,000 people, and you can join that support group. Tons of resources there. Ask a question if something is unsure, and they'll have a doctor that will answer that question for you. And we're coming up on doing something awesome and a new challenge. We're not going to do it in February just for time's sake, but this is probably going to be in March, and it's called the You Don't Know Squat Challenge. And the purpose of this is to get you to be able to get into a squat position. You'd be amazing how many people have horrible, horrible squats, or they blame their knees, they blame their genetics, they blame so many things. And you should be able to hold a squat position for your whole life. Okay. People are like, I don't like to squat. I don't like to, it's bad for your knees. And I'm like, well, do you poop? They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, you need to get up from a squatting position in order to do that. So it's just there in order for you to gain the mobility and the skills, because life doesn't care. Life doesn't care. And if you don't adapt, then life, again, just doesn't care. So you got to be able to keep up with life. One of the worst feelings in the world is life just throws you by, and life just throws you a loop, and you haven't caught up with it. But this is also not going to be hugely extensive. This is spend about 10 minutes a day on your mobility, and you'll see, if you do that every day for 30 days, you will see tremendous changes take place. I can promise you that. We use a principle known as specific adaptation to imposed demands, meaning if you place an increased stress in certain areas, the body has to adapt to it as well. If you're watching on Rumble, or if you're on Facebook, or if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see this is our t-shirt that we have for our challenge. And you see it's because you don't know squat, and it's a person squatting down. So it's something that's pretty awesome if you can support us with the t-shirt. Yes, there will be a little bit of equipment to get as well, but we'll go over the equipment that you need. So things that you can get on Amazon that are fairly inexpensive, like a foam roller, maybe even a kettlebell, and even a wobble disc, in order to help get your mobility back. These things are very important tools. These are things that I use almost every single day, except in that month, which will probably be in March. I'll be using that every single day, because even my squat can get a little bit better. And if you follow our stories, if you're on Instagram, today I squatted kind of heavy, not super heavy, but I squatted in order to get better mobility, and also to if you're not, whatever you're not constantly doing, the body adapts to that as well, which is why you need to get it back, and then you need to constantly be stimulating it as much as possible. So meat and veggie challenge happening right now, probably in March. We'll start the You Don't Know Squat Challenge. We have t-shirts that are going to be awesome. They're available. You can check it out on our Bonfire link. If you just type in Bonfire, and then you look at like Exemplify Health Center, you'll see all the t-shirts that we have made, and you can actually order those on demand. So you can order that. They'll make it for you. Just put it in your size, the t-shirt that you want. They'll make it for you, and then they'll print off, and then they'll ship it to you as well. So it's really awesome. I really like that. Okay. So as we get into stress, I want to go over a quick research article that I know will find a tremendous benefit. You guys ever heard of white fat versus brown fat? Okay. White fat versus brown fat. And let me ask you a question. When you look at brown fat has more mitochondria in it, which is why it's brown. And it's also easier for your body to use that as an energy source. Now, everybody needs white fat, and you also have some brown fat. But can you turn white fat into brown fat to help you to burn it better? And the answer is yes. Here is a pretty new, not super old article. It's about almost 3 years old. And the title of it is this: L-theanine. L-theanine activates the browning of white adipose tissue through the AMPK alpha ketoglutarate PRDM16 axis and ameliorates diet induced obesity in mice. This is a lot of words, but it's just saying, yeah, L-theanine helps you to burn fat better. Okay. So here's what they say. L-theanine is a non-protein amino acid. Remember this, it's an amino acid with much beneficial efficacy. This was in the Journal of Diabetes. We found that in intraperitoneal treatment of mice with L-theanine, 100 milligrams per kilogram per day, enhanced adaptive thermogenesis and induced the browning of inguinal white adipose tissue with elevated expression of PRDM16 and UCP1 and other thermogenic genes. Meanwhile, administration of the mice with L-theanine increased energy expenditure. In vitro studies indicate that L-theanine induced development of brown-like features in adipocytes or fat cells. Okay, L-theanine, L-theanine, L-theanine. Okay. So can you take L-theanine in capsule form? Yes, you absolutely can. But you know what is also a great source of L-theanine? Green tea. Green tea is a source of L-theanine, which is why green tea has so many amazing benefits with it as well. So I thought that was kind of cool. Going through the no sugar challenge, or I would also say the meats and veggie only challenge, people would be like, wow, I'm losing a ton of weight. And some people are like, yeah, it's just not happening. There's always a reason why that is. So can you do some things to help you be able to burn fat better? The answer is yes, you can. And I'm guessing that if it works so well, then I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies will patent it and then they'll try to turn it into some kind of medication. You guys ever notice this? This is not really related to stress. You guys ever notice this? Is all of the weight loss medications out there, um, and I will tell you this, some of the GLP-1 agonists, I even heard from the horse's mouth from a weight loss surgeon. You know, they rearrange your guts, do gastric bypass, gastric sleeves, and things like that. And I said, is there long-term research on these GLP-1 agonists? He's like, honestly, no. And think of that, all of the different weight loss medications and all the side effects that took place. And why do they not utilize them anymore? Is because there were too many side effects that they didn't realize what was going on, or because there was something that would work better. Interesting, huh? So straight from the Journal of Diabetes, I think this is really, really important. So let's talk about stress right now, shall we? Let's talk a little bit about stress. Okay. Now, here's my question to you, and type something in if you can, or give me a response if you can do that, if you're watching live. Here's my question to you. Who stresses more, men or women? Who stresses more, men or women? So go ahead and type your response in. Now, I've asked this question probably 350 times. And you know what everybody says? Who stresses more, men or women? And they say, women. And I was like, yep, women do. This is how you were built. Yes, all the people on Instagram, they're saying women, 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 women. You're absolutely right. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're watching on Instagram too, what stresses women out the most? What stresses women out the most? And what is your answer? What stresses women out the most? And I know that you're going to answer this right. So, or I should say, who stresses women out the most? And you're right when you say everyone is putting men in. Men, men, men. And you're absolutely right. All right. I want to apologize on behalf of all the men. I apologize if we have stressed you out. Let me give you an example of how this has worked in my life. Okay. Let me give you an example. I remember my wife and we were out to eat, and my wife's phone rings, and it was my oldest son who is now going to be 17 years of age here in a couple of days. But he was about maybe 8 years of age. And he called up and he's like, "Hey, mom, can I go out and ride bikes? Can I go ride bikes in the neighborhood with my friends?" And like immediately I'm like, "Yeah, go ahead, go ride a bike." And that's fine. Like, go ride a bike, make a big long jump it over the ravine, and make a big ramp and jump over it. Do it like Dukes of Hazzard style. Like, have fun, take some risks, and awesome. And I remember my wife, she just looked at me and just punched me. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Well, what would happen if he was riding along the train tracks and he got stuck on the train and a train ran over him? Or what would happen if there was some weird guy that was just waiting for him and kidnaps him? Or what would happen if he broke his leg, got a flat tire, and no one was there to help him?" And she kept going, and I literally said this, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, have have you really thought of all of those things?" And she's like, "I haven't even gotten started yet." I was just like, "Oh my goodness. Really, you think of all of these things?" And she does. She thought of all those things. And this is where I realized quickly that if I was in charge of my kids, they probably would be dead by now, or they at least would have broken their legs and their femurs at that point. So, women, you do a wonderful job of thinking of all the different scenarios. And if you've thought of it, you probably have been a little bit stressed by it as well. So, who stresses more, men or women? The answer is women. And what stresses women out the most? And you guys are absolutely right. You already said it. Yes, it is. It is men. Yep. And so, and I'm seeing this all over like YouTube. You guys are smart. Yeah, you guys have answered this correctly. You guys are doing pretty good. You guys are on quite a roll. Okay. All right. Now, the biggest thing that I would tell you is this: being stressed is not a badge of honor. How many people do you know that if you ask them, you're like, "Hey, Mary, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm so busy. I'm so stressed. I'm so stressed." And a lot of people wear their mental stress as if it's some kind of award. Like, who can be the most stressed? And now you're going to get the most stressed award. There's no awards for being the most stressed or the most busy. Okay. What life really wants is not how stressed you are. What life demands is, like, how do your kids develop? That's what life actually demands. Being stressed is not an honor, and it's not any kind of badge of honor. And I have met so many people who are so stressed, and I've met so many people who are so busy. And the reality is they're busy, but they're not successful. So if you find yourself busy, my question to you is what are you busy doing? Are you busy doing the things that really, really don't matter? And if you're like, yes, I'm doing a lot of things that don't matter. And then I'm like, well, you might suffer from self-importance then, okay? Which leads me to this. Do you suffer from self-importance? This is a very tough question. You have to be very honest with yourself. And I'm going to tell you something. I've suffered from this. I've suffered from self-importance that has caused me so much stress. Self-importance is this: I'm important. I'm at the center of the universe, and I have the ability to be able to change everybody's behavior, and I can just micromanage everything. And I suffered 100% from self-importance a lot. And that's why, if you even ask my staff, "How is it to work with Dr. Thompson?" They're like, "Oh, he's so laid back." It doesn't mean I don't make them work hard, but I also don't look over their shoulder as much, because I realize there's just certain things that aren't in my control. In fact, you're looking at right now one of the biggest micromanagers and one of the person who has suffered so much from self-importance in my past. I apologize for that. And I'm always trying to change. I'm always trying to adapting, but I'm going to tell you this is that I can honestly tell you is that you can follow me or not follow me. It's fine. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I don't do this for followers. I do this to change people's lives. And if you do it, great. And if you don't, I don't lose any sleep over it. So, do you suffer from self-importance? Because I run into a lot of people who do, who truly think that I can control every situation. I can micromanage everything. Now, let me also tell you this: stress is not all bad. So we think if you never had any stress, you would never grow. And think of this: what do you need to do in order to grow your muscles? You need to stress them. They respond to that stress by growing stronger. And that's why whenever you put in a person, if you try to avoid stress all the time, you never grow as a person. And let me give you a perfect example because I talk about this with parasites. Have you ever wondered why everyone thinks everyone's got a parasite now? And I'm like, is this your personal experience or is this just because you're watching TikTok? So, um, but I have had run across people who do have some intestinal parasites, and I say this, okay, we're not trying to like get rid of this. We're not trying to kill off pathogenic bacteria. What we're trying to do is create a better environment so that that bacteria is like, this is not a good place for me to grow. I'm out of here. Same thing with the parasite and things like that. Okay. And it's kind of like the 30-year-old, male who still lives with mom down in the basement. And why is he still living there? Because he's never had the stress of finding his own job, of paying his own rent, of paying his own car insurance, of paying anything on his own. Why won't he leave? Because he's comfortable. When will he leave? When you stress him out. When you stress him out, when you finally say you're doing your own laundry, you're paying your own rent, and you're going to make your own meals. In fact, you're going to pay all the utilities. He's going to be like, why would I want to live here? I'll live on my own somewhere. And that's what causes him to move out is the stress. Okay. So stress is not all 100% bad. In fact, a stress response can actually be very, very good. You'd be dead if you didn't have a stress response. So here's what happens physiologically when, in fact, you do have a stress response. Okay. Now we talk a lot about this is kind of what we talk a lot about in the inflammation talk is stress coming from chemical, mental, and physical. Chemical, mental, and physical. Physical stressors meaning those which are taken on by the spine and by the nerve system, which why so many people can get so sick, especially after a big head trauma or auto accident or something like that that damages the neck. Now, I want you to think of this. What is responsible for the perception of stress? It's actually your senses, it's your immune system. Where that's processed is in your body's limbic system, which is going to be in your neurology. And it then goes to the hypothalamus and then to the pituitary gland. And when the body perceives a stress, it's taken in via our eyes, our ears, past experiences, things like that. Then what happens is there's a stress response and the body is going to release and secrete hormones to help with that stress response. And so coming from the pituitary is going to release something known as adrenocorticotropin hormone, which is actually what stimulates the release of cortisol. You'll also have a stress response that goes through your sympathetic chain ganglia, which are sitting right outside your spinal cord. And that will actually cause a release of cortisol from the adrenal glands and then also adrenaline. I want you to think of this. Have you ever gotten scared and you get that adrenaline dump and you feel it like in the pit of your stomach and you're like, ooh, and then all of a sudden your heart starts to beat faster, your eyes pupils start to dilate, you start breathing harder. That's a stress response, okay? So when you have a stress response, that hormone response is the release of cortisol and also the release of adrenaline, which is considered a glucocorticoid. Okay. Now, when you have that response, here's what happens is that's going to start to mobilize blood sugars. That's going to cause your blood vessels to constrict around the heart peripherally. You'll see them start to expand. You're going to see that digestion shuts down. So it's going to slow down digestion. You're going to have a decrease in stomach acid. You're going to see that your muscles are going to get tight. Where do your muscles get tight? Around what it needs to protect, which is going to be the neck, anything to protect the neck and the spine to protect the nerve system. And then you're also going to have a lowered immune system response. So this is the change that takes place. It's going to increase your blood sugar. It's going to take more blood sugar to make it available for energy so you can run away from the perceived stress. Constriction of blood vessels, your pupils are going to dilate. Your digestion, you don't care about digesting food at that time, and you're not going to have high amounts of stomach acid. You're going to have tightening of muscles, which is why when you get stressed, where do you feel it? Oh, I feel it all my neck and in my shoulders. That's the body trying to protect itself from a stressor. And your body cannot differentiate between a real stress or a perceived stress. It's the same exact response. And then you're going to have a lowered immune response as a result. Okay. Now I know what you're thinking. Is that a bad response? No, it's perfect. The body doesn't make a mistake. Once you understand that everything that we come from, the body's not making a mistake, it's trying to adapt. The body is biologically programmed to adapt. And anytime that your body thinks that you say that the body is making a mistake, you will veer so far off and you will head down a path that is very hard to recover from. That's why same thing when you talk about autoimmunity, that the immune system is attacking itself. I'm like, well, that's interesting because it didn't attack itself for the first 20 years of your life and now all of a sudden it's programmed to go after healthy tissue. No, it's not. It doesn't make a mistake. However, you know who makes a mistake? You do. You make a mistake. Sorry, but you are making a mistake mainly because you've been given so much bad health advice. So I want you to think of it is that if a bear is chasing you and you have that stress response, it's the perfect thing for you to get out of the crisis, to get out of the emergency. You know when it becomes bad? When that bear never stops chasing you or that perceived stress, you don't handle it and it never ever goes away. And I want you to think of this, okay? Think of this. Let's say a bear really was chasing you and it was chasing you for an hour or so. And as soon as the threat was taken away, the bear decides, you're too hard. I'm just going to find an easier meal. And the bear walks away. And then I come along and I'm like, hey, let's go ahead and let's pull your blood. Let's measure your cholesterol. Let's take your blood pressure right now. Let's look at your heart rate. Let's look at your cholesterol levels. Let's measure your stress hormones. Let's measure your blood sugars. And I guarantee you is that you would probably have high cholesterol. Your blood pressure would be elevated. Your heart rate would be elevated. And there would be so many things wrong. And I'm like, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And if I decided to put you on, I said, well, you need to go on a statin drug. You also need to go on a blood pressure medication. And how long do I need to go on that for? Oh, just forever. There's no exit strategy, no exit plan. How many times have your doctor put you on a blood pressure med or put you on a statin drug? Was there any exit strategy whatsoever to say, we're going to do this for X amount of time? But if your problem is stress, let me help you get rid of those stressors. They'll never do it. You know why they'll never do it? Because they never get paid for it. And instead, they're required by their hospital to see 50 patients, excuse me, 50 patients in a day and get and to make a certain threshold, to hit a certain threshold, so they don't have time in order to spend with you for you to help get your life back under control. This is one of the biggest travesties of medicine. And in fact, I just read something that said people are living longer than ever before, and they're also living sicker longer than ever before. And in fact, about 15% of their life is spent being chronically ill. Excuse me, chronically ill. And why are we living longer? Because they give us medications in order to put the fire out, but we're living longer, sicker. And in fact, if you look over the past 40 years where lifespan was 65 years of age, now it's about 78 years of age. And they have actually said that 13-year change is mostly just spent being chronically sick and chronically ill with a terrible quality of life. Don't try to increase my lifespan if my quality of life is not going to be better. Don't try to make me live longer if I'm going to be in a diaper. Don't try to make me live longer if I'm going to be in a nursing home for that long. They can keep you breathing, but what they can't do is they certainly can't make you healthy, and they certainly can't help you in those regards, okay? So is that short-term adaptation with stress, is it good? Absolutely. It's a perfect response. Is there a long-term adaptation? Yes. What happens? Cardiovascular changes, insulin resistance, high blood pressure. Yes, you can even cause LDL. Why do we know that? Because if you look at the steroid hormone pathway, I want you to look at this. And for the body to make cortisol, you need something that's known as cholesterol. In order for you to be able to make progesterone, you need cholesterol. In order for you to make estradiol, you need cholesterol. In order for you to make testosterone, you also need cholesterol. And that's made by the adrenal glands, and it doesn't make all that it's needed within the cell. It has to take in exogenous cholesterol in order to make those sex hormones. And so your body says this: if I have a stressor, I'm going to go ahead and I need to make this stress hormone that's known as cortisol. And this is why you'll run into hormone changes that will take place, especially low progesterone. Okay. So you'll see cardiovascular changes in the form of insulin resistance. Why is that, Dr. Nate? Well, because remember, if you're always stressed, your body's always going to be trying to mobilize blood sugar for energy, means you can come in and we can do a fasting blood glucose, and your fasting blood glucose can be at 100 or 110. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is tell me about your stress. And then the next thing that you want to do is you want to lie to me and say that everything is perfect, and it's not. I know that it's not. And so you can develop insulin resistance from constantly being stressed. And just remember this too, is when I have a stress response, my blood pressure goes up, and blood pressure can be a killer if you leave it elevated for a long period of time. But doctors just takes, this ACE inhibitor, just take it, and it just manipulates it down. And then you're on blood pressure medication forever, developing a dry hacking cough. And you can also develop high LDL. Okay. This is why stress, there's a long-term adaptation to the cardiovascular system. What about to the gastrointestinal system? So you can develop things like acid reflux. Acid reflux has more to do with low stomach acid than it does too much stomach acid. Doesn't make sense to me. Are you like in too much rest and digest, or are you in fight or flight? Most people are spending most of their time in fight or flight, which causes low stomach acid. And one of the things that happens is with low stomach acid, that food just gets churned in the stomach, and it can pop up as it's getting churned. And if that sphincter isn't closed, called the pyloric sphincter, then it can cause all kinds of acid that damages the esophagus. Okay. That's why one of the things that can cause esophageal cancer. So it can cause acid reflux. It can also, guys, cause a lot of food allergies as well. If you don't break down your foods in the stomach from proteins into amino acids, if you get a lot of undigested proteins make their way into the gastrointestinal system, if those things actually start to leak through, if they're leaking through, then that can cause a lot of food allergies. Remember this, the body, the immune system responds to foreign proteins. Yes, that can be a toxin, that can be a foreign invader, that can be a bacteria, that can be a virus. That can also be a food too that you're constantly not breaking down, which is why it's so hard to overcome having chronic food allergies if you're always being stressed, unless you're always taking a lot of betaine hydrochloric acid in order to break your proteins down better. And you can also develop a lot of GI infections. Why is that? Because if you look at what the purpose of stomach acid is to break down your food, and it's also to sterilize your food. This is why when you see people taking a lot of PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, and if we do a stool test, we'll always see some kind of infection that's taking place because it doesn't sterilize your food the way that it's supposed to. And also, we'll see a lot of food allergies too, because you're not going to be breaking your proteins down. And there's also the risk of dementia. Why is that? Well, because it blocks acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is what the neurotransmitter you need in order to make memories in your brain. So gastrointestinally, you develop a lot of acid reflux, food allergies, gastrointestinal infections. What happens to your hormones? Do your hormones change? Absolutely. So I want you to think, if you're watching this and you're looking at this sex hormone pathway, think of this, is that what will always, if your body's adaptation is this, what will always take precedence? Stress will always. You getting out of an emergency will always take precedence. So if you're always stressed, a lot of these hormones can convert from progesterone in order to make cortisol. What will happen as a long-term adaptation? Well, you can develop menstrual cycle irregularity. You can do this from even over-exercising, because long duration exercise will cause an increase in cortisol. So this hormone isn't necessarily bad. If you didn't have any cortisol, you wouldn't get out of bed. But people have it because they're so constantly mentally stressed all the time. You can even develop a form of hypothyroidism too. And the reason why is because during high stress, you will also see high reverse T3, which means that T3, which is setting metabolic tone in a high stress state, the body will flip it, and that will known as reverse T3. And I've seen this extremely high in people who are extremely stressed. I've seen this high in people who are chronically ill. I've also seen this very high in people who are stressed. Let me ask you a question. Is your doctor measuring this? Are they measuring it? Are they just looking at just cortisol and saying, oh, yeah, you're fine? Or are they actually measuring these things, especially if stress is your issue? So, can it cause hypothyroidism, a form of it? Yes. Can it cause menstrual cycle irregularity? The answer is yes. It can also cause some of those issues too. What's a long term adaptation? The long term adaptation will actually be to your immune system. Long term adaptations mean it can cause immune suppression, which can lead to chronic infection, can even lead to cancer. Yes. I'm going to show you a research article. This is absolutely fascinating. Watch this. This comes from PubMed, Journal of Immunology from 2004. So this is almost 20 years old. And it's called this expression of the glucocorticoid receptor from the 1A promoter correlates with T lymphocyte sensitivity to glucocorticoid induced cell death. Excuse me. Okay. Here's what they say. Glucocorticoid hormones. What is this? These are things like your stress hormone. These are things like cortisol. These are things like adrenaline. These are known as your glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoid hormone causes pronounced T cell apoptosis or T cell death, particularly in immature thymic T cells. You guys ever wondered, like, oh yeah, your thymus atrophies as you get older? And I'm like, it's not supposed to, because that's where some of these T cells that are responsible for um, uh, viral immune system responses, for responses to specific tumors, things like that. These things mature within the thymus gland. Okay, so glucocorticoid hormone causes pronounced T cell death, particularly in immature thymic T cells. The relative level of expression of the 1A promoter to the 1B, 1E promotes within a lymphocyte population was found to directly correlate with susceptibility to glucocorticoid induced cell death, with the extremely glucocorticoid sensitive CD4, CD8 thymocytes having the highest levels of GR1A promoter activity. Okay. Now, I'm going to show this to you in action. Dr. Nate, what on earth is a glucocorticoid? Here's what it is. It's any group of corticosteroids like hydrocortisone, which are involved in the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and have an anti-inflammatory activity. Okay. You guys ever wonder this? If you have autoimmunity and they're trying to suppress your immune system. Well, originally they were putting you on glucocorticoids. They give you cortisone, and they're like, yeah, because it's massively anti-inflammatory. Well, all that did is just trick the body into thinking it was massively stressed out. And people who are on steroid medications for a long period of time, watch the commercials and why they say, yeah, you're at high risk for cancer. Why? Because it suppresses the immune response. When the body is under a perceived stress, it thinks it's high amount of stress, there's a lot of anti-inflammatory activity. And I want you to think of this. It makes sense, because if a bear is chasing you and you're running away and you sprain your ankle, the best thing to happen is for it not to swell up and hurt. So there's suppression of the immune system as a result. It just so happens that people suppress your immune response. They want to suppress your immune response for years, and then they wonder, oh my gosh, look at now you have cancer and you can't overcome an infection because of what it does to the immune system long term, and because there is an anti-inflammatory effect. Now watch. If I have a baby that's screaming and I cut out the baby's tongue, I haven't gotten to the reason why the baby was screaming in the first place. You can cut out my tongue, but you're not getting to the reason why that's happening, and that has most to do with how medicine is. I will actually say this: much of medicine is just really bad advice. Just really bad advice. How do you measure the immune system? Can you measure it? Yes. You do an expanded lymphocyte enumeration. You can measure your CD3, CD4, and your CD8, which are known as your suppressor T cells, also known as your killer T cells. If you look at this person actually was taking corticosteroids in order to simulate a stress response in order to have an anti-inflammatory effect. He was actually diagnosed wrongly with an autoimmune condition and was able to actually get off of these different medications. So if you look at his CD3 response, his CD4, you can see that they're all low. CD8, all of these, if these are low, this is what when they're measuring for HIV, when all of these are low, there's a problem. So this is why any viral infection can cause him a lot of issues. And I want you to think of this. You guys ever heard of Epstein-Barr virus, known with chronic fatigue syndrome? Um, and if you guys, I'm going to talk about this in just a second, but if you know anybody that has an Epstein-Barr infection, they'll call it mononucleosis, in which the virus is everywhere. Why does it only affect a certain number of people? And I want you to think of this. When do people get mono? If you say, "Hey, have you had mono?" Yeah. What were you doing when you really just got bowled over by it? And you're like, "Well, I wasn't sleeping enough and I was really stressed." All of those cause suppression immune system, which will make you susceptible to any virus. Okay. It'll make you susceptible to any virus. Stress related Epstein virus reactivation. Okay. So watch this. Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, remains latent in 90% of the patients following a primary infection. Once you have Epstein-Barr, you really already have it. Can you test for it? Absolutely. If you see the presence of IgG antibodies, it means there's been a reactivation taking place, especially if you can't get out of bed and you're just bowled over. But I'm always asking the question, what were you doing that led you to that point? Here's what they said. There was a significant difference between the rate of acute infection and reactivation among patients with elevated cortisol and epinephrine levels. So, with an elevation of a stress hormone known as cortisol, and also an elevation of a glucocorticoid known as epinephrine. So, I look at adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, things like that. Okay. So, Doc, I get it. I get it, Doc. What on earth can I do when it comes to stress? Number one, reduce everything that increases your cortisol exposure. Okay. Reduce everything that increases your cortisol exposure. So we talk about physical, chemical, and mental. Physical, everyone thinks it's all mental, but there can be some very bad physical things that are happening. There can be some chemical things that are happening. And so do you need some cortisol exposure? Yes, you absolutely. But if it's causing your body to be bowled over, then you need to get rid of anything that increases your cortisol exposure. Okay. Now, this will also mean getting to bed on time. That'll lower your cortisol exposure. Getting a solid 8 to 10 hours of sleep. I've never gotten so many bad, like just that's terrible. How am I supposed to do that? I have 6 kids. I don't know. Make yourself better, please. I'm not responsible all the time for everything that happens in your life. How am I supposed to do it? I don't know. Figure it out. But that doesn't change what your body needs. So physical, chemical, and mental. Okay. This is why people don't get enough sleep. Why they tend to overeat and they tend to have a lot more hunger and things like that. Physical. Have you gotten X-rays? Okay. Have you gotten X-rays? Because if you look at the X-ray on the left in a good curve, here's the eyes, teeth, the back of the head. If they're in a good curved position, then it's not stressing out the brain. Okay. If you look at the X-ray on the right, you can see no curve. Black line is where they're at. Red line is normal. And it's no different than saying, hey, your blood pressure needs to be here. It needs to be in a curved position. That's a stressor. That's why they have calcium deposition in the lower part of their neck. The reason why is because it's really been inflamed for a long period of time, and the body's trying to stabilize that area. Okay. So here's another form of physical stress. Do you over exercise? Do you over exercise? Because I run into people who will say this. Well, that workout was only like 7 minutes long. And normally I'm used to a 25-minute workout because I like to run a 5K 3 times a week. So I'm going to go out and get more exercise. More is not necessarily better. I'm going to tell you again, more is not necessarily better. You need enough stress in order to make things grow, but not so much that your body cannot recover from. So is overexercise a thing? Absolutely. Okay. Chemically, here's what you can do to help with cortisol exposure. Please watch your sugar intake. Okay. That's why we're doing the meats and veggies only challenge. Watch your sugar intake. Make sure you're getting your insulin levels checked. Make sure you get your A1C. Where should your A1C be at? I'm happy if you're at 4.9 to 5.2. You start climbing up higher than that, and it can cause brain atrophy. Who says so? The Journal of Neurology. So A1C, even under pre-diabetic, can cause some issues with accelerated brain atrophy. And that's why your blood sugars really, really need to be low. I will tell you that. And one of the ways in order to try to keep that low is just make sure you get enough sleep, guys. How much sleep should you get? 8 to 10 hours. And I know what you're going to say. And what planet do you live? Because I had about 4 people say that. And I'm like, why are you angry about that? What's your motivation by being angry out that? And they all said, well, I just have a lot of kids and it's impossible. And I'm like, I get it. I understand it. I have 4 kids. Right now, I'm doing my best to get 9.5 to 10.5 hours of sleep every single night because I skimped on sleep and it caused some issues with me. But I can't afford to skimp on sleep anymore. Just remember this, guys. Soon your kids will be out of the house. Soon they'll be out of the house. And the only one that you'll be left with is going to be your spouse. So make sure you guys are both taking care of each other. All right. All right. So mental stress. Test your cortisol rhythm. Okay. So one of the best tests in order to test your cortisol rhythm is known as the Dutch test. And yes, you can even block the stress response, which is why I love California poppy, L-theanine, and chamomile. If you're having a hard time staying asleep at night, the first thing I always say is, hey, are you menopausal? And number 2, what are your blood sugars like? Because I've had a lot of people when they were doing the meat and veggie only challenge, like, I'm having a hard time sleeping, and like that's more of a blood sugar issue than it's actually a mental stress type issue. But yes, California poppy, L-theanine, and chamomile can help to calm down the brain and help you with length and breadth and depth of your sleep as well. Okay. Here's some mental stress tips. Okay. Here's some mental stress tips. They help me, and I hope that they help you. Number 1, you're not at the center of the universe. Quit thinking that you are so important, because you're not. Okay. You're important in God's eyes, but to the average person, you're not that important to them. But most people think they're way more important, which is why I wonder if they're looking at me. They're so preoccupied with wondering that about themselves. They're not looking at you and they're judging you. But if they are, who cares? Who cares? That's why having a low ego and a high self-esteem is so important. A low ego, high self-esteem means this, is that I know who I am in God's eyes. Um, and I don't care what other people think. It doesn't matter what they think or what they actually say. That's how we call it: big God, little me. High ego, low ego, high self-esteem. And those things are always in opposition to one another. High ego, low self-esteem, or low self-esteem, very, very high ego. Okay. So stop thinking that you're at the center of the universe. Number 2 is not every event has to be a bear. What do I mean by that? It means this: you get to call it. You get to be the umpire. That's the wonderful thing about life, is you get to be the umpire and how you call stress. So you stress is only stress when you call it stress, and a strike is only a strike when the umpire calls it a strike. Not every event has to be an absolute bear. Okay. Number 3, please, please, please stop doing this. Stop micromanaging. Okay. Why do you micromanage? Because you think you have the power to be in control of everything. And you know who you exhaust? You know who you exhaust when you micromanage? Everyone around you, which is why they probably don't want to be around you. I try to micromanage everything. And you know who I severely inhibited? My staff. I inhibited my staff. You know, at one point, my wife's like, there's no way that I would want to work for you. You're just a bear. You're unbearable. When you micromanage your staff, if you're a boss, pay attention to this. If you're a boss and you micromanage, if you want them to feel defeated and not empowered, micromanage them and see how well they do. Okay. Um, and here's the 4th thing: don't make other people's issues your issues. Don't make other people's issues your issues. I want you to really pay attention to this. Is someone will say, you so and so did this to me. You're supposed to be mad at them. And I remember just thinking this, I'm like, life is hard enough than to have to dance around other people's issues. If you have an issue with a person, don't make that someone else's issue as well. Don't expect them to change their behavior just and have to remember everything about it. It's such a micromanaging ploy. Don't make other people's issues your issues and vice versa. Here's the last thing: you probably need more self-reflection than you do self-care. Probably need more self-reflection than self-care. And at the end of the day, you should self-reflect. You should say this: did I do my best? Did I do my absolute best? And stop worrying about it. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Please stop thinking it has to be perfect unless you want stress to kill you. Please. So, what can I take for mental stress? So, here's some things that can help. Okay. Now, I always prefer that people are working with me one on one because I want to avoid people taking a bunch of things all at once. Okay. So, number one, L-theanine. Number two, ashwagandha. What does ashwagandha actually do? Ashwagandha helps the brain tremendously. And ashwagandha also helps to get your cortisol rhythm under control, especially if your cortisol is just messed up. You're having a hard time waking up in the morning, hard time going to sleep at night. Mental stress, why betaine hydrochloric acid? Because if you are undergoing a lot of mental stress, you need to break down your proteins better, specifically in your stomach. Now, what about Bacopa? Okay. This is just not a terrible Barry Manilow song, the Bacopa Cabana. Terrible dad joke. I apologize. Um, but Bacopa actually helps the brain. I'm actually taking Bacopa right now, just as an FYI, for a lot of different reasons. But some other things too: valerian root, California poppy. California poppy is kind of like this. You know how a lot of people drink alcohol and they're like, "Yeah, it relaxes me," and I'm like, "Yeah, but there's so much sugar, there's so much brewer's yeast in it, and it's probably going to make you inflame. It's probably going to hurt your liver too." California poppy is like having a glass of wine without the all of the brewer's yeast in it, and also without the mental impairment. So you can have California poppy, and you can still sign your name, drive a car, you'd be fine. Um, and I will tell you this. California poppy, before I do an inflammation talk, I'll take 3 to 4 teaspoons, and honestly, when I walk into the room, it doesn't matter if there's 1 person there, it doesn't matter if there's 20 people there. I don't care. I don't care. So it helps me not to care so much about the outcome, and it's a great great stress reliever as well. California poppy actually does block a stress response. So even if you have a stressful stimulus, you can't really have a stress response, from it. This has been a lifesaver for so many people as well. So let me say this. This is for people who have to take a mental health day all the time. If you need to take a mental health day more often than not, you might be in need of more self reflection than you do of rest. Self reflection. And one of the reasons why people don't get out of the stress merry-go-round is that they don't reflect. They're never reflecting. And so at the end of the day, you should reflect on everything that you do. And if it was wrong, then right the wrong. And also understand is you don't have to be in control. Not everything has to be perfect. If you are a perfectionist, then stop trying to be perfect because the people who love you and care about you, they're not demanding perfection. You know why people leave you? Why people walk out of your life? Because they no longer see a future with you. And you have to be okay with that as well. If you need a mental health day more often than not, you might be in need of more self reflection than you do of actual rest. So here's about carrying the load. Okay. Here's about carrying the load. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way in which you carry it. Let me say that again. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way in which you carry it. Are you carrying a load right now and you're not carrying it correctly? That's what breaks down over time. Your body is meant to handle a certain amount of stress, but when it becomes too much and too overwhelming for too long, that's when you start to see your body break down. So make sure that you are carrying it in the right way. And this is why, guys, why this is so important. Our inflammation talk that's coming up Tuesday, January 30th at 6 o'clock, the in-person event. Go up and register for it. You'll see that on Facebook. You should also see that on Instagram as well. You'll see it on Linktree. You can get registered for that right now. I can't wait to see you. If you're from the Chicagoland area, please register for that. I can't wait to see you at that event. I'm so happy when I see people there because I know that what I have to say is going to change your life. And then the webinar, if you're from the contiguous 48 states, you want to work with me remotely, please go and watch that inflammation webinar. Please do that and do that right now. You'll see that even on Instagram. Work with me remotely, and it will give you a link. That link will be there to watch the inflammation webinar, and there'll be a link that you can join me for a discovery call with me. Yes, it's me actually in person that's calling you, and I would love to be able to see how I can help you as well. So got stress. Hopefully you guys can understand here is how and why it can absolutely kill you. Now, biggest thing that I would tell you is this: you can watch this and say, "Oh, that's awesome," and you go home and everything stays the same. But really make a change. Really, really make a change. If you don't know how to make a change, please reach out to me and see what we can do in order to help you get better. So, guys, can stress kill you? The answer is absolutely. And it's just the way that you are carrying the load. So, I'll be joining you next week, next Monday. If you have a topic that you want me to do, please put it on here. I'm always open to ideas and suggestions because I want to know what interests you. So if there's a topic that you would like me to do, let me know. I'll do my best. If I don't get to it next week, I'll do my best to get into in the next coming weeks. So because I want to know what you're interested in. Stress, of everybody is affected by it. So I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And then make sure that you say hello. Also, let me make sure if you haven't already, let me know where you're watching from. And I appreciate all of you. I love all of you. Thank you guys so much for letting me be part of your evening. I can't wait to see you guys very soon. I'll see you next week. All right. Be well, be blessed. And as always, remember who you are.